But let's dive in to some MLB free agency. We are officially into the thick of it, and some big time moves are being made. Let's start things off with the Baltimore Orioles going out and signing Pete Alonso to a 5 year, $155 million deal. It is the second highest AAV among first basemen behind only Vladimir Guerrero Jr. He has hit 34 or more home runs every single year of his career, minus that COVID season. Braden, what are your thoughts on this deal?
Yeah, I really like it for Baltimore. Obviously, the price tag is hefty, but I would say that Pete Alonso is absolutely worth it. He had 38 home runs last year. He led the National League in doubles with 41 and drove in 126 runs. I would expect his power numbers to be a little bit worse in Baltimore than they were in New York, just given the nature of the two ballparks and especially the left field fence in Baltimore being pushed a little bit farther back. But I really like the signing overall for the O's. Uh, Pete Alonso last year had a 347 on base percentage and a 524 slugging percentage. Both of those were career bests since his rookie season. Additionally, you look at his StatCast page, and the vast majority of those metrics are bright red. He was in the 95th percentile in xWOBA, and in fact, every full season of his career, which excludes the COVID year, he's been at least in the 80th percentile. And out of those, every year except for one, he's been at least the 89th percentile. Towards the top of the league in average exit velo, barrel rate, and hard hit rate, all of those he's at least the 96th percentile in. His defense was the worst of his career in 2025. He had -9 defensive runs saved, which was a whopping third percentile. However, at first base, his defensive shortcomings are less of an issue. And as recently as 2023, he did have 6 defensive runs saved. So maybe his defense rebounds in Baltimore. And regardless, the impact of his bat is well worth the shortcomings of his defense.
Yeah, I love it for Baltimore. You mentioned some of the potential power concerns going from the Mets to the Orioles. He had 38 home runs, 41 expected home runs. And if you translate that to Camden yards, he was actually expected to have 45 home runs if he was in Baltimore for the entire season. So maybe we even see a power uptick. I don't know. But this Orioles lineup is just disgusting. I mean, you're talking about Taylor Ward, who hit 38 home runs last year, or 36 maybe, hitting in the sixth spot. Jackson Holliday, Jordan Westburg, Gunnar Henderson, Pete Alonso, 1 through 4. That is just ridiculous. So this is a lineup that can compete with anybody's, even like a team like the Dodgers, I think. So I think this is a slam dunk for the Mets, or not the Mets, the Orioles. Definitely not a slam dunk for the Mets, but a great deal for Pete Alonso as well. Sticking with, we'll jump over that one for now. We'll go to Dylan Cease, who signed a 7 year, $210 million deal with the Toronto Blue Jays. He is now tied with Corbin Burns for the fifth highest contract value among pitchers. He's coming off, though, arguably his worst season of his career. He had a 4.55 ERA, a 1.33 WHIP, and was 8-12 with a pretty good lineup behind him in San Diego. So, Braden, what do you make of this one?
Yeah, I think you touched on his numbers being pretty much a career worst. I think a lot of that was to some extent luck related. Looking at his 2024 versus his 2025 campaign, in 2024, he had a 347 ERA, a 107 whip, and 10.6 strikeouts per nine. Last year, those numbers were up to 455 for the ERA, a 133 whip, and the strikeout numbers did climb. He led all MLB starting pitchers with 11.5 strikeouts per nine innings. But if you look at his StatCast pages, from 2024 to 2025, they were fairly similar. His expected ERA was at 331 in 2024. In 2025, it was 346. So to some extent, there was a lot of bad luck on that front. The whiff rate was pretty much in line too. 92nd percentile in 2024, 95th percentile in 2025. Then the expected batting average against was at 210 in 2024. In 2025, it was 216. A lot of it was just bad luck. That kind of correlates to a bad BABIP. You look at his 2024 BABIP allowed, 263. Last year, that number jumped to 320. I think a lot of that is going to be potentially regression back to the mean. We're going to see somewhere in the 270 to 280 range for his BABIP allowed this year. I'm expecting him to find a middle ground between his 2024 and 2025 seasons during his tenure as a Blue Jay. And Toronto really needs at least consistency there. Kevin Gausman is great. Chris Bassett's been really good. But then beyond that, it's been a very mixed bag with Jose Barrios. Last year, you had Max Scherzer, Eric Lauer, Bowden Francis making a ton of starts. Adding Cease and a full season of Trey Savage should be a big boost to the Jays rotation. I am a little bit skeptical of the hefty price tag on Dylan Cease. I'm not sure he's worth the fifth highest AAV among starting pitchers in baseball, and giving him a 7-year deal is a little bit sketchy. But right now, the Blue Jays, you're coming off of a World Series appearance. You almost won it. It makes sense to go all in. And worst case scenario, you have to deal with the consequences later. So I don't love this signing, but I also don't hate it. I think it's solid, like C plus B minus.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty perfect what you said. The numbers definitely didn't tell the full story last year. You mentioned the expected stats. His ex ERA was a full run below what his actual ERA was, and he's a fantastic strikeout pitcher. Had 215 across 168 innings. Had 224 in 2024. And yeah, he's a guy who you really don't have a whole lot of injury concerns for. He's pitched a full season. I mean, I think every season of his career. I don't have the full numbers pulled up, but at least the last 4 seasons, he has played 162 games worth of innings. So I don't love the value for the Blue Jays, but like you said, it makes sense why you go out and do this now. You are firmly in a championship contending window, and your rotation is probably the worst part of your team right now. So going out and getting a guy who can be a true number one ace option, I think makes a ton of sense. Even if it's a slight overpay, I think it's what this Blue Jays team needs. So I don't mind, breaking the bank a little bit to go out and get your guy. Going back over to the Mets, Edwin Diaz went from New York to LA, signed a 3-year, $69 million deal with the Los Angeles Dodgers, the highest AAV of any reliever in baseball, and rightfully so, because Diaz was maybe the best relief pitcher in all of baseball last year, had a 1.63 ERA, a .87 whip, and 98 strikeouts over just over 66 innings pitched. Braden, what do you make of this deal?
Yeah, for Edwin Diaz, it looked like 2024 maybe could be the beginning of a fall off, and he made sure in 2025 that that was not the case. It's pretty clear now that 2024 is more of an outlier, coming off of a torn ACL that wiped out his entire 2023 season. In 2025, you touched on his numbers. I'm going to touch on the underlying metrics behind him. 99th percentile in expected ERA, and 99th percentile in expected batting average, and 99th percentile in whiff rate, and 99th percentile in strikeout rate, and only 94th percentile in barrel rates. So he fell off a little bit in that category. But regardless, Edwin Diaz, I think, is pretty clearly the best closer in baseball. And the rich are just getting richer with him going to the Dodgers. Money for them is no object. So I can't even grade $23 million being the highest salary for a reliever. It's a drop in the bucket for the Dodgers. This is an A plus deal for them.
Yeah, I mean, this is like the fourth true closing pitcher option that this Dodgers team has. They add Edwin Diaz to Tanner Scott, Alex Vesia, and Blake Trinan. Comfortably the best bullpen in all of baseball. And even though you're paying him $23 million a year, Edwin Diaz has proven that he is well worth it. An expected ERA of 2.64 or better in each of the last 5 seasons. That is absurd. Does not give up a lot of hard contact. His expected batting average has been right around 160 each of the last 4 seasons. So there's really not a whole lot to say that hasn't been shown by Edwin Diaz. I mean, he is maybe the best relief pitcher in all of baseball. So yeah, I think this is a slam dunk comfortably for the Dodgers. And then replacing Edwin Diaz in New York is going to be Devin Williams, who signed a 3-year, $51 million contract with the Mets. So stays in New York, bounces from the Yankees to the Mets. He struggled a bit last year, had a 4.79 ERA, and I checked this earlier. If you combine his ERAs from 2022 through 2024, it would still be lower than what his ERA was last year, which is just a crazy stat. With that said, his expected stats would look much more like what you would expect from Devin Williams. So, Braden, what do you make of this deal for the Mets?
Yeah, I thought it was a great job by the Mets to pivot after losing Edwin Diaz. Yeah, the raw numbers for Williams were pretty awful as a Yankee, but you talk about his underlying numbers and the expected ERA. He had an expected ERA of 309. I would expect to see his ERA next year dip back below at least 250, if not below 2 once again. His expected batting average allowed was sub 200, 95th percentile in baseball. He was also 97th percentile in chase rate and strikeout rate, 99th percentile in whiff rate. The only major differences between his 2025 and his 2023 StatCast pages are the average exit velocity and barrel numbers dropping from about like the great level to average. I think he's built for a bounce back in 2026, and I would be shocked if he's not, putting up another 40 plus save season for the Mets.
Yeah, I think this is also a great signing for the Mets. He's didn't show it last year necessarily, but the underlying numbers would still indicate that this is also one of the best relief pitchers in baseball. And the fact that you're paying him 18 million less over the next 3 years compared to what Edwin Diaz got. Edwin Diaz is the better pitcher. I don't know that he's $6 million a year better than Devin Williams is. So just comparing the two side by side, I think value wise, it's fantastic. And yeah, last year was definitely the outlier, but everything underlying would indicate that that is not what should have played out. And that 2026, you can expect much more of what we're used to from Devin Williams. Still strikes out a boatload of guys. His walk percentage was actually down quite a bit from last year or from 2 years ago. Went from 12.5 in 2024 to 9.7 in 2025. So I think Devin Williams is going to bounce back in a big way, similar to what you said. I think right around that 2.5 ERA mark is pretty spot on. So I think it's a good signing for the Mets. And then not necessarily a signing, but a re-signing. Kyle Schwarber re-signed with the Philadelphia Phillies on a 5-year, $150 million deal. He had the best year of his career last year by a wide margin, set career highs in home runs, RBI, and OPS. But $30 million is a lot for a primary DH. So, Braden, what do you make of this?
Yeah, I don't honestly have a whole lot to add beyond what you've already mentioned. If you exclude the MVPs last year, he was arguably the best hitter in baseball. He had the sixth best OPS plus in all of MLB last year at 150, also a career best. I think even though he's a primary DH and almost exclusively plays DH, he's still providing a ton of value to the Phillies. And with the team being on the cusp of breaking through the National League, bringing him back is a no-brainer. I think they are going to regret, giving him $30 million a year once you get to year 4 or 5 of that contract. But at the same time, you have to do it if you want to capitalize on this potential World Series window. With the Bryce Harper, the Trey Turner core, I think it was something you had to do if you're Philadelphia. So, with all things considered, I still think it's a good signing, even if it might age a little bit poorly towards the end of the contract.
And yeah, I think that's the perfect way of putting it. Kyle Schwarber was one of the best hitters in all of baseball last year. 100th percentile hard hit percentage, 99th percentile barrel rate, 98th percentile average exit velocity at 94.3 miles an hour. His expected slugging percentage was 572. That was also 99th percentile. And then a 98th percentile xWOBA, which is expected weighted on base average at 402. That is very, very good. Obviously, 98th percentile. But what we've seen from Kyle Schwarber the last couple of years is, early 2020s, he was a guy who consistently hit like 200 to 210. Maybe he'll have a 220 season if, he's really seeing the ball well. The last 2 seasons, he's been 248 and 240, and his expected batting average has been 255 each of the last couple seasons. So this is a guy that we're seeing put the ball in play more, which I think is a fantastic thing considering how hard he hits the ball. So if he keeps doing that, hitting at the top of this Phillies lineup, getting on base for guys like Bryce Harper, I think this is going to be a well worth the $30 million that he's getting paid every year. So kind of the same thing with, like you said, with Dylan Cease. It might be a slight overpay right now, but if this is a team that goes on to win a title in the next 5 years, which they're certainly capable of, we're going to be looking at this and saying, yeah, that was well worth it. So yeah, I'm with you. I think it's a very good signing for the Phillies. And then some other less notable signings, and I'll rapid fire through these a little bit, and then we'll each hit on a couple of them. Relief pitcher Robert Suarez signed with the Braves on a 3-year deal. Infielder Jorge Polanco goes to the Mets on a 2-year deal to play first base. He'll be Pete Alonso's replacement. Closing pitcher Ryan Helsley goes to Baltimore on a 2-year deal. Starting pitcher Adrian Hauser to the Giants on a 2-year deal. Closer Kenley Jansen to the Tigers on a 1-year deal. Catcher Danny Jansen to the Rangers, 2-year contract. Relief pitcher Luke Weaver to the Mets on a 2-year deal. Outfielder Adolis Garcia to the Phillies, and Josh Bell to the Twins on a 1-year deal apiece. Braden, which of these signings stands out the most to you?
Yeah, I'll take one signing I liked and one that I'm a little bit skeptical of. I really like Atlanta's acquisition of Robert Suarez. The last 2 years in San Diego, he's had a sub 3 ERA in both campaigns. Last year, he led the National League in saves with 40. Additionally, his ERA plus has been above 140 in both of those seasons. He's got a FIP last year that was at 288. He had a sub 1 whip, actually almost below point 0.9. A lot of things indicate that he's going to be an elite closer for Atlanta for the entirety of that contract. And then I didn't love the Jorge Polanco signing for the New York Mets. He has one MLB appearance as a first baseman and technically 0 innings played at first base. I don't know exactly how that happened. It might have been some like shift thing that Seattle put on late in the game, and maybe they lost without recording it out in that inning. But it was a weird signing to have him play first. First base is the easiest position to learn during your career. I think that's pretty clear from the guys that have translated from playing the outfield to going to first base or catcher to first base. But it just strikes me as a band-aid on the bullet hole that is losing Pete Alonso. Jorge Polanco last year was great. He had an OPS plus of 134. That was a career high. But the number his OPS plus in 2024 was 92, which is below league average. And that is somewhat of an outlier because a lot of his career has been in that 110 to 120 range. But the risk reward of paying him $40 million just isn't worth it to me.
Yeah, and I'll touch briefly on both these guys. I think for Robert Suarez, it makes a lot of sense for the Braves. Your closer is Raisel Iglesias, who, to be honest, is not a whole lot older than Robert Suarez, but you need another guy in that bullpen if you're going to get back to where the Braves think they can be, which is a World Series. So going out and getting another piece in Robert Suarez, I think makes a lot of sense. It was a 3-year, $45 million deal, if I'm not mistaken. The thing with Robert Suarez that I've never fully understood is he throws his fastball like 70% of the time, and it's just a fantastic pitch. Like everybody has to know the fastball's coming. Because the other thing too, I mean, he's got a fastball, a changeup, and a sinker, and he's throwing the fastball and the sinker roughly 75-80% of the time, and he just gets outs. So like something's working for him that I don't know about. But yeah, he's been a fantastic closer. 6 saves over the last 2 seasons, and a sub 3 ERA both those years. So I like it a lot for the Braves. And then yeah, I'm with you. I don't fully get the Jorge Polanco. I understand wanting another bat, but to go out and say you're going to play a guy at first base that has never really played there, and I understand too, first base is probably the easiest position to play in baseball as someone who played a lot of first base. But to expect a guy to make that move after having never done it, and I guess we've seen other guys do it in the past, like Bryce Harper, but I don't know. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, especially to replace a guy like Pete Alonso, who is just one of the best at his position in the sport. So I'm with you. I didn't fully get that one either. I'm going to stick with the Mets, though, as my first one. I'm going to go with Luke Weaver as a signing I really like. Both of mine that I'm going to mention, by the way, I like a lot. But Luke Weaver to the Mets on a 2-year, $22 million deal. It feels like addition by subtraction for New York. You lose Edwin Diaz, but you go poach the Yankees' 2 best relievers for essentially just as much as Edwin Diaz signed for. And Weaver has been a fantastic setup man for multiple years now. He gets a ton of whiffs. He's had a sub 1 whip over the last 2 years put together. I think his whip was like a 103 in 2025 and a .92 in 2024. So to get 2 relievers for the price of one that you lost, I don't think the Mets are going to be losing sleep over that, as good as Edwin Diaz is. And then the other that I want to mention is Adolis Garcia to the Phillies on a 1-year, $10 million contract. This would have made a lot more noise 2 years ago because Garcia has really underperformed the last couple of seasons. He has not eclipsed a 700 OPS, a 230 batting average, or a 310 xWOBA since 2023. And as I said, xWOBA is expected weighted on base average. League average for that is roughly 315, 320. And so to not eclipse 310 in the last 2 seasons is certainly below average. However, I think this is a fantastic fit for the Phillies because what have they been lacking for several years now? It is defense at the corner outfield spots. You swap out maybe the worst defensive outfielder in baseball in Nick Castellanos for a 70th percentile defender in Garcia. Citizens Bank Park also plays very well to right-handed power which is Garcia's strong suit offensively. So I think this is a plus signing for the Phillies. 10 million a year or for 1 year for a guy who had a 836 OPS just a couple of years ago and is a clear upgrade defensively, I think is fantastic. And even if it doesn't work out, you're paying him half of what you paid Castellanos annually. So this is a very low risk, high reward signing for the Phillies, and I'm a big fan of it.
Yeah, with Garcia, we saw how well Harrison Bader played, both offensively and defensively for Philadelphia after coming over at the trade deadline from the Minnesota Twins. If you can get, that production defensively and maybe 70% of that production offensively, because Bader was absolutely phenomenal. I think he had like an 800-ish OPS during his tenure as a Philly. If you can get 70% of that at the plate, or maybe 80% of it, I think you're going to be in a good spot if you're Philadelphia. It's a very low risk signing. Worst case scenario, Adolis Garcia continues to prove that his bat, isn't worthy of his defense. And at that point, you can move on with minimal dead money, or you trade him and, bring in somebody else. So it's a very low risk signing. I like it for Philly. And then with Luke Weaver, kind of same thing there, although he is definitely more, I would say, has a higher floor for sure than Adolis Garcia does. He's been great the last couple of years. Had an expected ERA below 3 last year, expected batting average below 200. He and Devin Williams, I think, are going to be showing why they are continuing to get big money despite having relative struggles in terms of the raw numbers last year. Luke Weaver was at a 3.62 ERA. I expect that to be below 3 for sure, potentially in the sub 2.5 range, like I said with Devin Williams.